My name's Maris Halden. I used to believe that if you loved people hard enough, long enough, they'd eventually make room for you. Not in the spotlight, just at the edge of the frame. For years, I played my part quietly, thinking silence meant strength and giving meant belonging. But there comes a day, sometimes just an ordinary Tuesday, when something shifts. Not loud, not tragic, just enough to make you look at your reflection and whisper, maybe this isn't love after all. Please listen all the way through. Then tell me, was I wrong to draw that line? Was I selfish or finally honest? It was a Tuesday morning in late April when everything I thought I understood about my family quietly collapsed, not with an explosion, but with a single text from my mother. I was standing in the middle of my apartment in Seattle, suitcase zipped, boarding pass printed, passport tucked safely into the side pocket of my purse. The place smelled faintly of coffee and dryer sheets, clean, calm, controlled. I'd even taken the time to wrap up the little glass vase I found at the thrift store a few months ago. The one my mother had admired in passing and said, "That would look lovely on my nightstand in Maui." I imagined myself handing it to her with a smile the moment we checked in. This wasn't just a trip, it was a promise. Or maybe it was an offering. I had spent nearly 2 years saving up, saying no to dinners out, turning down little weekend getaways with coworkers, skipping hair appointments, so I could plan something meaningful. A real vacation. For them. For me. I'd booked a full week at Kalo Haven Resort in Hawaii. 3 rooms, ocean view, all paid for in advance. A gift, yes. But more than that, a quiet hope that maybe, this time, things could feel like family again. My mom, Irene, had taken charge of the logistics. "Let me handle the details," she told me back in January. "You always stress too much about the little stuff. Just pay the balance and get yourself to the airport." So I did. I didn't argue. I booked the flights she suggested. I covered the room upgrades. I even offered to take the red-eye if it meant lining up with their schedule. It wasn't about comfort for me. It was about showing up, showing effort, something I'd been doing my whole life. That morning, I woke up early, too early. I made toast, but didn't eat it. I kept checking my phone for no real reason. My bag was packed. My ride to the airport was scheduled. Everything was ready, except me. There was a flutter in my chest. Not quite anxiety, not quite excitement. Just something unsettled. And then, at 9:27 a.m., came the text. "Don't head to the airport. North Horizon just notified me there's a storm over Seattle. All flights are being delayed. We'll rebook later. Don't worry." At first, I didn't react. I just stared at the screen, read it again. And again. Storm? I looked outside. The sky was gray-blue, but still. Not a single branch moved. No wind, no rain. The cherry blossom tree across the street was in full bloom, delicate pink petals clinging to the air like confetti. I called her. No answer. Tried Dad. Voicemail. Delia's phone rang once, then cut off. Line busy. I sat down on the edge of the couch, still holding the handle of my suitcase. It tilted slightly, as if unsure whether to fall or stand. My apartment, usually a quiet comfort, felt suddenly too quiet, like it was absorbing something I hadn't said out loud yet. I opened the airline's website. My flight? On time. No delays, no weather advisories, nothing. I turned on the TV, flipped to the Weather Channel. The forecast was almost cheerful. Sunshine for the rest of the week, with temperatures rising into the low 70s. The newscaster smiled behind her desk, as if to personally assure me, everything is fine. And that was the moment the pit in my stomach started to settle into something heavier, something sharper. It hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been a last-minute airline glitch. It had been a lie. A simple, calm, premeditated lie. A lie meant to keep me home. I leaned back against the cushions, staring at the vase still wrapped in bubble wrap. I had meant to surprise her with it. A small gesture, but one I thought might matter. Now it just looked out of place, like I'd brought something fragile to a place it was never meant to go. I didn't cry. Not right away. What came first was a strange kind of laughter, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes, that gets caught somewhere in your chest. I felt the air press up against my ribs, but couldn't let it out all the way. I wasn't sad, not yet. Just emptied. And in that space, where sadness should have sat, came a thought. A single, clean, undeniable thought. They're there without me. No hesitation, no confusion, just the clarity of knowing, and they didn't think I'd notice. Maybe that's what stunned me most. Not that they'd gone without me, but that they hadn't even tried to cover it well. Like they truly believed I wouldn't check the flight, or the weather, or the facts. Like I was still the little girl who would take any explanation at face value, who would nod quietly and stay behind if told to. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a 33-year-old woman who'd paid for every inch of this trip, and somehow still didn't have a place in it. After I turned off the TV and sat there for a while, something inside me just disconnected. It wasn't panic, not yet. It was that strange middle ground between shame and recognition, like when someone finally says the quiet part out loud, and you realize you'd known it all along. I opened my laptop and pulled up the reservation confirmation for Kahlua Haven. It was still under my name, Maris Halden, primary guest. My credit card on file, all the extras I'd added, spa vouchers, private dining deposit, island tour. I'd thought I was building something beautiful, something shared. Now it just felt like a joke I hadn't been in on. I didn't want to sit in that apartment and spiral, so I grabbed my coat and walked down to Blue Fern Cafe, a place that had become a quiet corner of sanity for me over the years. Sunday mornings, soft jazz, black coffee in thick ceramic mugs. Familiar. Joyce was behind the counter, her usual calm self, wiping down the bar with slow, even strokes. She looked up and tilted her head the second she saw me. "You look like you forgot your own birthday," she said, nodding me toward my usual table by the window. I gave a small laugh that didn't quite reach my throat. "Feels worse than that." She brought over my coffee without asking. No sugar, just cream. She didn't hover, just sat down across from me, resting her hands on the edge of the table like she was grounding herself for something more than casual conversation. "Want to talk?" she asked. I hesitated, then shrugged. "It's family stuff?" Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's never just stuff." There was a pause. I stared out the window, watching a man walk his dog in a sweater that matched his own. Something about it made me want to cry. "I planned a trip for my family," I said slowly. "Paid for it. Every part of it. We were supposed to go together. And they're already there, without me. My mom told me not to come because of a fake storm." I let the words settle between us like dust on a shelf. "They lied." Joyce took a sip of her own drink, then set it down with quiet precision. "I know that kind of silence," she said. "My son stopped speaking to me after I left his father. I stayed in a marriage too long, thinking it made me a good mom. But what he remembers is me being small, always apologizing." Her eyes met mine. "People don't leave who you are. They leave who they made you become." I didn't say anything for a while, just let it echo. She didn't press, just patted my hand once before standing. "If you need quiet, you're welcome to sit here as long as you like." And I did. For almost an hour, letting the coffee go cold, letting my mind wander through birthdays, where Delia got the big cake, and I got the grocery store version. Through Christmas mornings, where my gift was always practical. Through the time Mom said, "You're lucky you're so independent. I never have to worry about you." Like it was a compliment. Like not needing her was something to be proud of. I walked home slower than usual, the kind of slow you do when you don't really want to arrive. On the sidewalk, there were tiny pink petals scattered from the cherry blossom trees. They stuck to my shoes. I didn't brush them off. At a red light, I opened Instagram, more out of habit than anything. And there it was. A photo posted 2 hours ago. Delia, smiling wide in a sundress I recognized. Mom with her oversized sunglasses, holding a frozen drink. Dad in his golf hat. Harlan, Delia's husband, throwing up a peace sign. They were sitting at a seaside restaurant, the ocean glowing behind them like something out of a postcard. The caption read, "Family first. Grateful for this time together." No mention of me. No, "wish you were here." No empty chair in the frame. Just four people. Happy, complete. I stopped walking. Let the people pass around me. I read it again. That's when the ache turned to something sharper. Not rage. Not even betrayal. Just clarity. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd planned it that way. I tried calling Mom first. Straight to voicemail, then Dad. Same thing. Delia's line rang once, then cut off. When I called again, it went straight to, "This user is unavailable." That was the moment I stopped telling myself it was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't silence by accident. It was silence by design. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone like it had personally betrayed me. Not just for today, but for every time it had buzzed with a request, a need, a guilt-laced, "Can you help out this month?" And I had answered without thinking. Automatically. Like that was just my role. Growing up, I used to think love meant being low maintenance. Being the daughter who didn't ask for too much, who stayed quiet when things got tense, who carried her own bags at the airport and never made a scene in public. Mom used to call me her little grown-up. I thought it was praise. Delia, on the other hand, was always delicate, sensitive. Mom said she had a softer heart and needed more care. She was 5 years younger, and somehow, even now in her late 20s, still got away with acting like she was 15 when things didn't go her way. I remembered summers where I'd be sent to science camps through a scholarship program. On paper, it sounded impressive. But the truth? I would have given anything to just be at the beach like Delia, who got flown to Florida with Mom for emotional refreshment. Mom used to say, "You don't need me to hover over you, Maris. You've always been strong. You figure things out." And I did. I figured out how to pack my own lunches, how to open my first bank account, how to keep my voice level even when my chest felt tight. But somewhere along the way, that strength became an excuse. For them, not me. Strength became a reason to leave me out. I opened my inbox again, looking for the resort confirmation. I clicked through the fine print, the add-ons I'd paid for months ago. Spa vouchers, private dinners, a massage package for the whole family, as Mom put it, when she asked me to include it. I opened the activity log and scrolled. Then I saw it. One of the spa vouchers I'd paid for, already used. Date, Monday, April 24th. Name, Delia Halden. Listed as guest number 3. I just stared at the screen for a moment. My whole body froze. Not in anger. More like something inside me just stopped moving. They used everything I had planned. My money, my time, my effort. The very things I'd thought would bring us together. They became tools for them to enjoy without me. Like I didn't exist. Like I wasn't ever really meant to be there. I closed the laptop, hands trembling just a little. Not from anger. Anger had already passed me by. This was something colder, older, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. This wasn't new. It was just clearer now. I remembered a Thanksgiving when I was maybe 14. I'd cooked the green bean casserole and set the table. Mom was fussing over Delia's hair, telling her which earrings to wear because Grandma would want her to look soft and sweet. I sat there with mashed potatoes on my sweater, and no one noticed. Or the Christmas I gave Mom a handmade photo album I'd spent weeks putting together. She opened it, smiled, and placed it under a stack of gift cards Delia gave her. That photo album was never seen again. Even as an adult, nothing changed. When I got promoted at work, I told Mom. She said, "That's great, honey," and pivoted to telling me Delia was thinking of starting her own Etsy shop. I was always the utility, never the moment. And I accepted that, because I thought that was what love looked like. Quiet loyalty, making things easier for everyone else, never being the problem. But now, with that email still open and my name at the top, my card, my booking, my name on the line, I realized I had paid for my own erasure. I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been excluded. Intentionally. Cleanly. like a menu item someone opted out of. I wasn't invited. Not to this trip. Not really. And maybe not to anything that wasn't about solving something or fixing someone. I looked around my apartment, small but warm, full of things I picked out for me. The bookshelves, the worn-in couch, the hanging plant that somehow kept living despite my lack of attention. This place had never judged me, never asked me to be smaller, quieter, easier to love. My phone buzzed again, just a reminder from my flight app. Your flight to Kahului is still on schedule. I let it buzz. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to follow through. I sat back, let the silence stay, and let the truth settle like dust on hardwood. They didn't think I'd notice. They were wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw anything or call them back with 1,000 questions I already knew the answers to. I just sat there on my couch, staring at that little line of text under Delia's name, the one that proved she'd used the spa voucher I bought, and I felt something go very, very still inside me. I closed the email, took a breath, opened it again. I clicked Modify Reservation. It was all right there. My name, my credit card, my permissions. I hadn't just booked the rooms, I had full authority over every part of the package. I hadn't thought much of it when I checked that box weeks ago. I just figured, as the one paying for it all, I should have access in case anything went wrong. I guess something finally did. I clicked through the service options and started making changes. First, I canceled every add-on. The massages, the private dinners, the extra excursion Delia had begged Mom to include. Gone. Then I disabled the minibar in each room, set limits on room charges. Finally, I updated the billing instructions, split all new charges equally between the 4 guests, left a note in the system. All expenses beyond original reservation are to be charged to guests individually. Do not forward to primary account. I hit save. The screen blinked. Changes confirmed. I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not shaking, just resting. I felt strangely calm. The kind of calm that comes after a fire has burned everything down, and there's nothing left to protect. I picked up my phone and called Blue Fern. Joyce answered after the second ring. "Maris," she said, like she'd been expecting me. "I did something," I said. "Well, I'm doing something, right now." "You want to come in and sit with it?" Number I just needed to hear a voice that wouldn't lie to me. There was a pause, a soft breath on the other end. "Tell me," she said. I told her everything. Not in perfect order, and not all at once, but enough. When I was done, she didn't say much, didn't fill the silence with advice or platitudes. Instead, she asked, "What do you want them to feel?" I didn't even hesitate. Exactly what I felt this morning. The line went quiet again, but not unkind. It was the kind of silence that lets things settle. "Well," she said eventually, "it sounds like they might." After we hung up, I just sat for a while. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the fridge and a bird chirping outside the window. I looked around at the space I'd built for myself, the framed print above the bookshelf, the mismatched mugs drying in the rack, the candle I never lit because it felt too nice to use. My phone buzzed. Mom. I let it go. Then Dad, then Delia, then Harlan. Within 5 minutes, I had 7 missed calls and a flood of texts. "Maris, what's going on? Why would you cancel everything? This isn't funny. Explain yourself." I opened the message thread, watched the bubbles appear and disappear as someone typed, erased, typed again. And then I opened a new message, typed out one sentence. "This is my gift. Now you know what it feels like to be left out." I stared at it, read it once, then again. I didn't send it, not yet. I just held the phone in my hand, letting it rest there like something sacred, like a truth I didn't owe them, but could offer if I chose. For once, the silence was mine. And I wasn't in a rush to fill it. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I lay there in bed, covers pulled up to my chest, the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. The lights were off, but the room wasn't dark. Street lamps outside threw long, shifting shadows across the wall, and even though my phone was face down on the nightstand, I could still feel it pulsing every few minutes, like it had its own heartbeat. Every time it buzzed, I didn't need to look. I already knew who it was. I didn't answer a single one. There was a time, not so long ago, when just seeing Mom's name light up on my screen would have triggered a flood of anxiety. I would have sat up, wiped my face, and prepared to make peace, to smooth things over, to be the good one. But tonight, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a garbage truck rumbling somewhere down the hill, and the silence inside me. A silence that no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like something I'd earned, something I finally understood. That buzzing phone reminded me of a different kind of silence, the kind I'd known since I was little, the kind that didn't come from peace, but from being told over and over, in small, quiet ways, that I didn't need as much, that I could wait, that I should know better. I remembered being 10, sitting on the front steps of school long after the last bell rang. My backpack at my feet, arms wrapped around my knees. Everyone else had been picked up. The secretary had gone home. I remember counting the cracks in the sidewalk, trying to look like I wasn't waiting, even though I was. When Mom finally pulled up, frazzled and apologetic, she laughed and said, "You didn't mind waiting, right? You're my patient one." And I smiled. I always smiled, because that's who I thought I was supposed to be. But now, lying there in the dark, I asked myself something I had never dared to before. If I had a daughter, if she saved up for a trip, made all the arrangements, paid every bill, and the people she loved deliberately left her out, would I tell her to forgive it? Just because it came from people who called themselves family? The answer was so clear it hurt. Number I wouldn't. And the moment I realized that, really let myself feel it, something in me broke open. Or maybe it finally fell into place. I had spent years trying to be the easy one, the helpful one, the one who made life smoother for everyone else. But the truth? I had traded my self-respect for access, and they had never thanked me for it. Around 10 in the morning, after a night of silence, my phone rang again. But this time it was from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "This is Maris," I said, voice rough from not speaking. A woman on the other end, polite but cautious. "Hi, Miss Halden. This is Danielle from Kahlua Haven Resort. I just wanted to confirm a few recent changes made to your booking." I sat up. "Yes, I made those changes yesterday." "Well," she continued, "it seems the guests under your reservation weren't aware. They've asked us to restore the original services. Would you like us to proceed with their request?" I looked out the window. The trees outside were just beginning to bud. Early signs of spring, pale green against gray skies. It felt like the city itself was hesitating between seasons. "No," I said. "Keep everything as is. Cancel the extras. Lock the minibar. Move the charges to the individual rooms." Danielle paused. "Would you like us to notify the guests directly?" I almost said yes. But then I realized they didn't deserve my explanation. "No," I said. "Let the billing speak for itself. And if they ask why, tell them this. All I paid for was the roof over their heads. I'm no longer paying for the illusion." There was a beat of silence. Then Danielle said softly, "Understood, ma'am." I ended the call and just sat there, phone still in my hand. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was just truth. Quiet, firm, long overdue. I didn't feel lighter. I felt steadier. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed again. I flipped it over, muted the ringer, and slid it into the drawer. Let them call. Let them wonder. For once, the silence was mine, and I wasn't rushing to fill it. Because this silence wasn't emptiness. It wasn't invisibility. It was the sound of me finally being done. And that's a language they'd have to learn without me. The phone rang again the next morning. It was barely past 7. The sun was just starting to peek through the blinds, casting thin lines of light across the floor like someone was still deciding whether or not to open the day fully. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, both hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug I'd had since college, the one with a faded owl and the words "Stay Wise" printed in flaking gold. The phone vibrated once, then again. I glanced at the screen. Mom. Something in me exhaled before I even touched the phone. I didn't brace. I didn't plan. I just answered. Maris! Her voice rushed in like water breaking through a dam. What are you doing? Do you know what kind of scene you've caused? The concierge practically interrogated us this morning. Harlan's furious. Rufus is embarrassed. Delia hasn't stopped crying. She didn't pause for breath. You're making us look awful. People are starting to talk. They think something's wrong with us. That line, they think something's wrong with us, stuck. Not something is wrong, but they think. As if the only problem was the way others saw it. As if the lie was fine, so long as no one noticed it had been broken. I didn't answer right away. I let her voice echo a little. Let her pile on the blame while I took another slow sip of coffee. It had gone lukewarm, but I didn't mind. The warmth wasn't the point anymore. The weight in my hands was. Finally, I said, Why didn't you want me there? The silence that followed was immediate and heavy, like she'd walked into a room expecting the furniture to be where she left it, and it wasn't. I thought you were busy, she said, her voice unsteady now. You've been working so hard, always tired, always stressed. I just figured, maybe you'd be relieved, a small break. You didn't need to worry about all the details. I stared at the wall across from me, where a strand of ivy hung down crookedly from the bookshelf. I didn't speak yet. I wanted her to sit in what she'd said. You didn't ask, I finally said. Well, she snapped back, faster this time. You're not exactly sentimental about these things. You hate crowds, you don't like humidity, you barely enjoy the beach. Delia loves all that. I blinked slowly. But you still didn't ask. Mom's voice faltered, softened again. It was just easier this way. There it was. Not, I'm sorry, not I was wrong. Just it was easier. I stood up and walked over to the window. Outside, a woman walked by, pushing a stroller with one hand, a dog leash in the other. She looked tired, but focused, like she didn't have time for noise. And naming Delia the primary guest for the spa? I asked. Was that easier too? This time, she didn't answer right away. Just a breath. Maybe two. I didn't know that would show up in the system. I didn't move. You didn't think I'd notice. There was another pause, long and squirming. I just thought, no, I said. And this time my voice was flat but solid. The kind of calm that comes after you finally put something heavy down. You thought I'd let it go. You thought I'd do what I always do. Nod, smile, and make excuses for everyone but myself. She was quiet. Then the tears started. You've always been strong, she said, sniffling. You never needed as much. Delia's different. She needs support. She's fragile. I closed my eyes. I'm not strong because I didn't need love, I said quietly. I'm strong because I learned not to expect it. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shallow, uneven. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd see it now. But then came the line I knew was coming. I can't believe how cold you're being. Her voice cracked, full of that performative hurt that had once worked on me like a charm. You're being heartless, Maris. You're not acting like yourself. I smiled faintly, not because I found it funny, but because I finally saw it for what it was. I haven't changed, I said. You're just finally seeing the parts of me that stopped performing. She didn't know what to do with that. I could feel her scrambling for a place to stand. I don't hate you, Mom, I added, softer now, almost kindly. But I'm done paying the emotional bill to sit at a table where I'm always served last. She choked on a sob. You're my daughter. And I always will be, I said. But I'm not your scapegoat, not your background character, not your safety net. Then silence. No more words, no goodbye, just the click of a line going dead. I stood there by the window, phone still in my hand, and let the quiet settle around me like dust in sunlight. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt still. For the first time in my life, I hadn't folded myself to fit the story. I had drawn a line, and this time I hadn't erased it. It was a little over an hour after I hung up on Mom when my phone lit up again. This time, it was a text from Delia. "Why are you trying to ruin this trip?" No greeting, no explanation, just that sharp, pointed tone, like I'd walked into the middle of a performance and pulled down the curtain. I stared at the message without blinking. Not angry, not surprised, just familiar. Delia had always responded to discomfort with accusation, always expected the room, or the world, to rearrange itself around her mood. She wasn't really asking, she was demanding an apology wrapped in guilt. And I didn't even feel the pull to give her one. Instead, I opened the family group chat, the one I'd been in for years but barely used. I'd scrolled through it so many times before. Birthdays, inside jokes I wasn't part of, photos of quick family dinners I wasn't invited to. The captions always had that same performative warmth. My heart is full. Love our little clan. Couldn't ask for more. I'd learned to laugh them off, to tell myself I was just overthinking, that being left out wasn't intentional, just an oversight. I'd convinced myself of that lie for years. But now I knew better. I typed a single line. No one ruined this trip. I just stopped paying to be ignored. And then I hit send. 3 dots appeared. Someone was typing. Then they disappeared. No reply. That silence, it didn't sting. It didn't cut. It just confirmed what I already knew, that my place in that thread, in that version of family, was always conditional. I had never really belonged. Not unless I was funding the togetherness and staying quiet about the loneliness. I put the phone down, not dramatically, not with any sense of finality, just done. There was nothing left to negotiate. I opened my banking app. The monthly transfer to Dad, the one I'd set up 3 years ago when he didn't want to ask but could use a little help. I canceled it. Then I went to the shared credit card account, the one where Mom had a secondary card for emergencies. I'd never questioned a charge. I'd never asked why emergencies sometimes included designer candles or a massage package. Delia thought Mom deserved. I removed her access. The final click felt like a knot loosening at the base of my neck. I wasn't trying to punish them. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I was just no longer volunteering to be a background character in a story that used my generosity as scenery. Next, I logged into the resort portal one last time. I typed out a short message to the guest services desk. My role ends here. That was it. No explanation. No passive-aggressive tone. Just the truth. I sent it and stared at the confirmation screen for a moment. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not a thunderclap. Not a transformation. More like an exhale. One I didn't know I'd been holding for years. I stood up, pulled on my coat, and left the apartment. Outside, the air was crisp, still damp from last night's rain. But underneath the chill, there was something else. That early spring smell. Wet soil, budding leaves, the promise of green. A season turning without permission. I walked to Blue Fern Cafe, hands tucked in my pockets, shoulders a little straighter than usual. Not because I was trying to look strong, but because, for once, I didn't feel small. When I opened the door, the familiar jingle sounded above my head. Joyce was behind the counter, drying mugs like always. She looked up and saw me, and for a second, I wondered if she already knew. If she could see it on my face, that something had closed and something else had finally opened. She didn't ask any questions, just gave me a nod toward my usual seat. I sat down, and she brought over the coffee without a word. I wrapped both hands around the cup, let the warmth seep into my fingers. I think I finally said no, I said, more to myself than to her. Joyce pulled up the chair across from me, rested her arms on the table, and looked me right in the eye. No, she said gently. You didn't just say no, honey. You said enough. I looked at her, really looked, at the soft lines around her eyes, the quiet strength in the way she never pushed, never prodded, just offered space. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to admit. I had been waiting all my life for someone to hold space for me the way I held it for others. And now, finally, I had that. Not through drama, not through revenge, just through a line I had never dared to cross, until now. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I just sat there, in a little cafe, that smelled like cinnamon and something warm baking in the back, and let the silence I had chosen settle around me like a soft coat. It didn't roar. It didn't preach. It just whispered, "You did it. You stopped pretending. You are still here." And it felt like peace. Not loud, not triumphant, but mine. A week passed. 7 slow, quiet days since I ended that call with my mother and quietly laid down the weight I'd been carrying for over 3 decades. That weight had taken the shape of duty, of politeness, of let it go and just keep the peace. And when I put it down, nothing happened. There were no follow-ups, no last-minute apologies, no second wave of outrage or guilt or even explanation. Just silence. But this time, the silence wasn't mine. It didn't come from swallowing words or tiptoeing around feelings that weren't mine to protect. This silence was theirs. And for once, I didn't rush to fill it. I went to work like usual, stocked almond milk and vegan granola at Pine and Fern, helped a teenage boy who looked lost in the produce aisle figure out how to tell if a mango was ripe. I trained a new cashier, laughed politely at my manager's bad pun about tempeh. Nothing collapsed. I still went to Blue Fern every morning. Joyce always had my mug ready by the time I walked through the door. She never asked how things were going. She didn't offer unsolicited wisdom. She just handed me the coffee and let me take up space in the quiet. That meant more than I knew how to say. One morning, as she wiped down the counter beside me, her movement slow and easy, like someone who had long ago made peace with the pace of things, she looked up and asked, casually, like it had just occurred to her, "Would you do it again, if you could go back?" I didn't even need a second to think. "I wouldn't change a thing," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, clear. Then I paused, looked out the window, where the sidewalk was still wet from a light drizzle. "Except maybe I would have stopped sooner." She smiled then, a small knowing curve of the lips, not triumphant, just sad. Sad in the way only someone who's lived through the same truth can be. "Yeah," she said, "that's the part that stings the most." That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was an email. Subject: Maris, no greeting, no punctuation, just my name. As if that alone was enough to open a door again. The message was short. "I know you're angry, but you're still my daughter. We are still a family, no matter what happens." I read it 3 times. My hand hovered over the reply button. But I didn't type anything. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel guilt. I felt distance, like the email had been written to a version of me that no longer lived in this apartment or this body. The old me would have responded, would have tried to explain, justify, smooth things over. But I'd spent so long trying to twist myself into a shape they could understand, a shape that never quite looked like me. And love, real love, shouldn't require translation. So I closed the email, and I deleted it. In that moment, the word family shifted again inside me. It stopped being about who had my blood or who shared my last name. It became about who showed up, who listened, who made room for the full, complicated version of me. Not just the parts that were convenient or useful. And in that sense, Joyce had quietly become more of a mother to me than my own ever had. That evening, I opened my hall closet. On the top shelf was a small box wrapped in brown paper and tape, the one I'd packed the week of the trip that never happened. Inside was the glass vase, delicate, uneven around the rim, a little scratched at the base. I'd found it at a thrift store the year before, and when I held it up, Mom had said, "Oh, that's lovely, but I have no place for it." I'd bought it anyway. I had planned to give it to her in Hawaii. A peace offering, I think. A bridge between all the years of awkward silences and swallowed words. But now I knew who it really belonged to. The next morning, I walked into Blue Fern a little earlier than usual. Joyce was slicing lemon loaf at the counter, humming softly along to the old Stevie Wonder song playing from the radio. I placed the box on the counter in front of her. She glanced up, towel still in one hand. "What's this?" I smiled, felt the edges of it touch something tender inside me. Something I meant to give someone else. But now I think it belongs with someone who sees me. She blinked just once, then slowly unwrapped the paper and lifted the vase from the box. Her fingers were gentle, almost reverent, tracing the curve of the glass, like it was more than just an object, like she understood what it had carried all this time. She didn't speak right away. Then, softly, "You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." She stepped out from behind the counter and wrapped her arms around me. Not tight, not performative, just enough, just right. We stood there, in a cafe that smelled like warm cinnamon and fresh coffee, the hum of the world going on around us, and I let myself feel the shape of something new. I didn't need to say anything else. Some truths don't need punctuation. Some goodbyes don't sound like endings. They sound like beginnings. And as I walked back outside into the soft gray morning, wind brushing against my face, I thought, maybe I didn't lose a family. Maybe I finally stopped pretending I had one. Sometimes letting go isn't loud. It's quiet. It's a decision you make in the stillness, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Maybe you've carried something for years, believing it was love, until one day you realize love shouldn't make you shrink. If you've ever felt like the background character in your own story, I hope this reminded you. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to be seen. Have you ever had a moment like that? One where you chose yourself, finally? If this story stayed with you, I'd be honored to have you along for the next one.